Om Namo Narayanaya. Welcome back. Today we are starting Canto 4 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Before I delve into this, I just want to say I finished reading Canto 3, I think it was maybe 3 months ago. Took some time, read some other stuff that's come up on this channel, and I have to say I've been thinking about the Srimad Bhagavatam and delving back into it, and wow, I really like this book. I really like the first 3 cantos that I read. After the fact, thinking about them. I mean, I enjoyed them at the time, but thinking about them, this is such a great book. This is my holy book. This is amazing. I really like this. I hope the next few books are just as good. But if not, those first 3, I think everyone should read those. What's interesting is I read a 4th of the Upanishads on this channel, which you may have watched. I also put out the Yoga Sutras. And I kept seeing in these videos, as I would read, ideas, particularly in many of the sutras, in many of the Upanishads, ideas that I'd already encountered in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So I believe that many of the Upanishads were written before this Purana, so this is simply just expanding and accentuating what already exists. But the way it does that, and the way it fleshed stuff out, I just remember reading some of those Upanishads going, oh, I've already encountered this idea in a better way. It's like there's something about the Srimad Bhagavatam where the ideas just flow for me so much more. It's funny how a book, after the fact, you realize, oh, that was just such a great book. Even if at times it was a struggle to read, even if at times I didn't really get it or I was confusing. Other times just like, yeah, no. Anyways, today we're going to be starting Canto 4, Chapter 1. Oh, first of all, Canto 4 is entitled The Creation of the Fourth Order. Chapter 1 is called Genealogical Table of the Daughters of Manu. Sri Maitreya said, Svayambhuva Manu begot 3 daughters in his wife, Satarupa, and their names were Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. Akuti had 2 brothers, but in spite of her brothers, King Manu handed her over to Prajapati Rutsi on the condition that the son born of her be returned to the king as his son. This he did in consultation with his wife, Satarupa. Rutsi, who was very powerful in his Brahminical qualifications and was appointed one of the progenitors of the living entities, begot 1 son and 1 daughter by his wife, Akuti. Of the 2 children born of Akuti, the male child was directly an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his name was Yajna, which is another name of Lord Vishnu. The female child was a partial incarnation of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, the eternal consort of Lord Vishnu. Manu very gladly brought home the beautiful boy named Yajna, and Rutsi, his son-in-law, kept with him the daughter Dakshina. The lord of the ritualistic performance of Yajna later married Dakshina, who was anxious to have Lord Vishnu as her husband, and in this wife the Lord was also very much pleased to begot 12 children. The 12 boys born of Yajna and Dakshina were named Tosha, Pratosha, Santosha, Bhadra, Shanti, Itaspati, Idma, Kavi, Vibhu, Svahamna, Sudeva, and Roxana. During the time of Manu, these sons all became the demigods, collectively named the Tushitas. Maritsi became the head of the 7 rishis, and Yajna became the king of the demigods, Indra. Manu's 2 sons, Priyavrata and Uttanapada, became very powerful kings, and their sons and grandsons spread all over the 3 worlds during that period. Manu handed over his very dear daughter, Devahuti, to Kardama Muni. I have already spoken to you about them, and you have heard about them almost in full. Manu handed over his daughter Prasuti to the son of Brahma named Daksha, who was also one of the progenitors of the living entities. The descendants of Daksha are spread throughout the three worlds. You have already been informed about the 9 daughters of Kardama Muni, who were handed over to 9 different sages. I shall now describe the descendants of those 9 daughters. Please hear from me. Kardama Muni's daughter Kala, who was married to Lalitsi, gave birth to 2 children, whose names were Kashyapa and Purinima. Their descendants are spread all over the world. Of the 2 sons, Kashyapa and Purinima begot 3 children, namely Viraja, Vishvaga, and Devakulya. Of these 3, Devakulya was the water which washed the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu and which later on transformed into the Ganges of the heavenly planets. Anasuya, the wife of Atri Muni, gave birth to 3 very famous sons, Soma, Dattatreya, and their Vasa, who were partial representations of Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, and Lord Brahma. Soma was a partial representation of Lord Brahma, Dattatreya was a partial representation of Lord Vishnu, and Vasa was a partial representation of Lord Shiva. After hearing this, Vidura inquired from Maitreya, "My dear master, how is it that the 3 deities, Brahman, Vishnu, and Shiva, who are the creator, maintainer, and destroyer of whole creation, became the offspring of the wife of Atri Muni?" Maitreya explained. When Lord Brahma ordered Atri Muni to create generations after marrying Anasuya, Atri Muni and his wife went to perform severe austerities in the valley of the mountain known as Riksha. In that mountain valley flows a river named Nirvinya. On the bank of the river are many ashoka trees and other plants full of palasha flowers, and there's always the sweet sound of water flowing from a waterfall. The husband and wife reached the beautiful place. There the great sage concentrated his mind by the yogic breathing exercises, and thereby controlling all attachment, he remained standing on one leg only, eating nothing but air, and stood there on one leg for 100 years. He was thinking, "May the Lord of the universe, of whom I have taken shelter, kindly be pleased to offer me a son, exactly like him." While Atri Muni was engaged in these severe austerities, a blazing fire came out of his head by virtue of his breathing exercise, and that fire was seen by the 3 principal deities of the 3 worlds. At that time, the 3 deities approached the hermitage of Atri Muni, accompanied by the denizens of the heavenly planets, such as the celestial beauties, the Gandhavaras, the Siddhas, the Vidyaharas, and the Nagas. Thus they entered the ashrama of the great sage, who had become famous by his austerities. The sage was standing on one leg, but as soon as he saw that the 3 deities had approached before him, he was so pleased to see them all together that despite great difficulty, he approached them on his one leg. Thereafter he began to offer prayers to the 3 deities, who were seated on different carriers, a bull, a swan, and Garuda, and who had held in their hands a drum, kusha grass, and a discus. The sage offered them his respects by falling down like a stick. Atri Muni was greatly pleased to see that the 3 devas were gracious towards him. His eyes were dazzled by the effulgence of their bodies, and therefore he closed his eyes for the time being. But since his heart was already attracted by the deities, somehow or other he gathered his senses, and with folded hands and sweet words he began to offer prayers to the predominating deities of the universe. The great sage said, "O Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, you have divided yourself into 3 great bodies by accepting the 3 modes of material nature, as you do in every millennium for the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all of you, and beg to inquire whom of you 3 I have called by my prayer." I called for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, desiring a son like him, and I thought of him only. But although he is far beyond the mental speculation of man, all three of you have come here. Kindly let me know how you have come, for I am greatly bewildered by this." Upon hearing Atri Muni speak in that way, the three great deities smiled, and they replied in the following sweet words. The deities told him, "Dear Brahmana, you are perfect in your determination, and therefore as you have decided, so it will happen. It will not happen otherwise. We are all the same person upon whom you are meditating, and therefore we have all come to you. You will have sons who will represent a partial manifestation of our potency, and because we desire all good fortune for you, these sons will glorify your reputation throughout the world." Thus, while the couple looked on, the three deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshvara, they disappeared from that place, after bestowing upon Atri Muni the benediction. Thereafter, the partial representation of Brahma, the moon god, was born to them. From the partial representation of Vishnu, the great mystic Datreya was born, and from the partial representation of Lord Shiva, Vedavyasa was born. Now hear of the many sons of Angira. Angira's wife Srada gave birth to 4 daughters, named Sinivali, Kulha, Raka, and Anumati. Besides these 4 daughters, she also had another 2 sons. One of them was known as Uttaya, and the other was a learned scholar, Braspati. Thereafter, from the partial representation of Brahma, the moon god was born from them. From the partial representation of Vishnu, the great mystic Datreya was born, and from the partial representation of Lord Shiva, Vedavyasa was born. We're actually going to pause here on verse 33, about half the chapter, because it goes on to list more of the genealogy, and it can be a bit much. If you've ever read Genesis in the Bible, it can get you know what I mean. That's the one thing kids, I remember, we were all kids at the time, but in college I remember everyone complained about having to read Genesis, and it's begot. And this is kind of the begot. Yeah. So there was a line here, I just want to go back to it briefly. So let's see, there are 2 children born, a boy and a girl, Yajna and Dakshina, and they're separated. And then in verse 6, Yajna marries Dakshina. He marries his sister, and they have 12 boys. Yes, we've got some incest going on here. No doubt about it. These are beings who have been blessed or are incarnations of the Lord, or a Lord. They are part of God. So these are not normal people. Obviously, later we read Atri Muni stood on one leg for 100 years, breathing only air. Now, I wouldn't recommend that. You're not going to make it. But he could, because he was blessed by God. So, this doesn't necessarily advocate incest. This is incest happening in a special circumstance to special people. It's different than it is today. And it's different than for the rest of us. Further, I don't know if this takes place in the Kali Yuga or before the Kali Yuga. If it takes place previous to the Kali Yuga, things were different then. They really were. Gods walk the earth during a previous Yuga. But this is a different context, different people doing very special things. They are blessed by the Lord. Things are different. It's not the same. It's not actually advocating. It's not actually really advocating incest, that you should sleep with your sister and have 12 children. It's not saying any of that. And note that the 12 children became demigods. So this is very, very unique. And I feel foolish talking about this. But context is important. It matters. If you took that line of incest out and you ignored the rest of this book, yes, you could condemn the Srimad Bhagavatam as endorsing incest. But context makes a difference. And we have a tendency in society to take context away from things. We like to remove context. It's how we win arguments. It's how we prove our points. It's how we don't have to step back and go, I'm wrong. If there's no context, you're often not wrong. But it is so very important. And I think, that'll be my last thought, that Hinduism is suffering because we often take ideas out of it and we take away the context. There's a very famous line that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that all paths lead to him. And thus people say all the time, well, obviously, Hinduism is universalism. When it comes to religion, all religions are the same, and they all... But if you read the next line in the in the Bhagavad Gita, all these words that sounded like, he specifies those paths. He talks about what the paths are. And they're all in his world already. They're all Hindu paths. They're all tribes. They're people. It's not, and Muslims will come to me, and Christians come to me, and Buddhists, and Zoroastrians, and Wiccans, and whatever. No, it's not that at all. Context matters. He actually is not endorsing universalism of religion. But we remove the context, we take the line, and we run away with it. And it's doing an injustice to that. It's doing an injustice to our arguments, and we're not being honest with ourselves. And when we argue against or for something and we're not being honest with ourselves, how can we then turn around and be honest with you know who? We can't. We honestly can't. So, that's my soapbox. You can agree or disagree. Anyways, it's great to get back into the Srimad Bhagavatam. I really do like this book. I really, really do. It has parts like this which are kind of a dry read. I got that, but it is just a great book, and we could go through so many different lines here and talk about other things. And I highly recommend the first 3 cantos. Just read those 3 cantos. Actually, the second and third. The first one, is the foundation for the story and talks about Krishna. But I love this. This is my holy text, and here we go, delving into it again. All right, so that's enough. Hopefully, I didn't get myself too much in trouble this time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.